So with the news that the Spirit merger has broken down with Frontier, it's starting to paint a grim new reality for the American low-cost carrier market. And I'm going to argue here today that if Spirit ultimately goes under, we may be looking at not the departure of one airline, not two, but maybe three, a complete wipeout of the entire low-cost carrier market in America. And ultimately not a great picture for the consumer. So how exactly did we get here? Let's spiral back. And of course, with Spirit Airlines being shot at when they're trying to fly into Haiti, you gotta wonder if this bankruptcy is the biggest problem that they're facing right now. I mean, if your employees are getting shot at by gunfire, you would think that would take a higher priority. But jokes aside, let's get into it. So the timeline so far is that Spirit has been struggling with its engines on its Airbus fleet and also struggling to recover since COVID. This has put them in a dire situation where they required to perhaps merge with another airline to keep their business flowing. They tried many different things, such as furloughing many pilots. I think it was around 330 pilots. They also tried changing around routes and sticking to just the profitable ones, but it looked like that merging with another airline was the way forward. And wouldn't you know it that there were two airlines on the market who were very interested in merging with Spirit. The first, of course, was JetBlue. JetBlue came to the table looking to get Spirit for their pilots, their aircraft, and their routes to other cities outside of Florida and the Northeast. However, they were unable to go ahead with the merger when it was blocked by the Department of Justice. And I'm going to argue as well that this block was not great for the consumer. The Department of Justice said that this block was to protect the customer. However, only 10% of routes between Spirit and JetBlue were shared, so around 1 in 10 people would have been affected by one of the airlines no longer operating that service. So really, it wasn't a huge impact. But now JetBlue wouldn't have access to the aircraft and would have less of a competitive argument against the big four airlines. So in a opposite way, now prices were more secure with the big four airlines rather than passengers losing out on a Spirit service. Kind of makes you wonder whose side the Department of Justice is on. So then Spirit went looking to work with another airline, perhaps with Frontier, who also flies an all Airbus fleet. However, that deal didn't go through and has then since collapsed, and Spirit is now looking at actually filing for bankruptcy and may go. Now, what's interesting about the Frontier deal is that it kind of also looks like that Frontier also needed the Spirit merger for different reasons than JetBlue, who just needed the aircraft and the pilots, but Frontier is looking like that they're really struggling to get ahead with their profit barely over the big black line that allows them to stay solvent. It is possible that in the next year or two we might see Frontier entering the exact same problem areas as Spirit did as they struggle to maintain their service. Now, like a house of cards, with Spirit gone and perhaps Frontier gone, we'll then be looking at JetBlue. And JetBlue has been struggling to escape the West for a while now, and as I've mentioned, they really needed these new aircraft because of the backlog with Airbus. Because the backlog is so damn huge to get new aircraft, JetBlue is struggling to expand and struggling to take on the big four carriers in their home markets. So if there was a way for them to, get out and about and start flying into those things, like getting these new aircraft from either Spirit or Frontier, then that would be a complete boon for them. And it is possible that if Spirit does go into bankruptcy, that JetBlue can finally swoop in and get their aircraft. And this problem by JetBlue is also created because of where it sits on the market. It's more expensive than a low-cost carrier, but it's cheaper than a legacy aircraft. And because of that, they're actually more expensive to operate with none of the advantages of the big four airlines, like, those vast international routes, their alliance partners, although they are trying to expand into that space and trying to keep all those business customers. And so if they're able to acquire new aircraft, say for example if they took over all of Spirit, they would be able to expand their fleet size to be able to expand out of that Florida area and the Northeast where they're located. Plus, Spirit has some excellent landing slots at airports all across the West Coast, particularly LAX, which JetBlue would absolutely love to have more services too. And of course, because it's so expensive to get these landing slots, you can imagine that they would pay a pretty premium to get them from an airline that is financially struggling. Part of the reason that we're seeing so many low-cost carriers struggle these days is because the big four airlines, the legacy carriers like American, United, Delta, and Southwest, have all seen that they can jump into this marketplace with their own little tactics, like charging for baggage, charging for you to choose your seat, and also charging you for food and services. So if the big four legacy carriers are punching down and becoming cheaper and being able to offer passengers more ways to spend their money and thus create more of a profit, it's bleeding out the market for these ultra low cost carriers. And that's why we're starting to see airlines like Spirit and Frontier struggle. And we've also seen other airlines follow this trend, like Southwest, who normally used to be able to just buy a ticket and then you just chose your seat when you got on the plane, have actually started to switch over to seat selection before the flight. This is because this system works and it makes them more money than their current system where you go on and just sit wherever, which was designed to speed up boarding and deplaning, so they didn't have to spend as much on gate fees. So in a way, Spirit and Frontier didn't carve out a new market segment of an ultra low cost carrier, they just forced the other airlines to do worse, which has resulted in this situation. So with this future potentially happening, with Spirit going under and then perhaps Frontier and JetBlue struggling to fill in the gap, we're going to see, ultimately, prices rise for these routes. And it is a shame because it does make me wonder that the Department of Justice, who blocked the JetBlue merger, are they really doing everybody a favor? They said that they wanted to protect the one customer whose route might be monopolized by a JetBlue and Spirit sort of combined airline, but in the end it looks like that without those airlines bringing the prices down, the legacy carriers are just going to increase the prices. And I know this for a fact because here in Australia, with Qantas and Virgin Australia, when Bonza went bust and Rex Airlines soon followed earlier this year, the prices have substantially increased, with the two legacy carriers snapping up all of the available capacity. So I fear that the very same thing is about to happen, and it does make me wonder whose side is the Department of Justice on when they're blocking these sorts of mergers. In the end though, in my opinion, the very best idea would have been JetBlue merging with Frontier and Spirit and becoming the new fifth legacy carrier. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.